Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wild and Wise. I'm grateful to have a Chicago legend here on the show with us today, Miss Kristin Kaza. Hi, Kristen. How are you?
I'm great. It's a unseasonably warm day in Chicago. It's like 84 degrees outside in October.
That's amazing. For people who don't know you, can you please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Kristin Kaza. I am a longtime event producer, sometimes known as my moniker Party Mom, for creating welcoming and joy generating event spaces and helping community connect in Chicago, especially LGBTQ community, and lifting up the artists and the small businesses in our city, especially LGBTQ businesses and artists, women, and people of color in Chicago.
Amazing. You're also a mother to two twins.
I am. I have twin identical Gemini girls. So it's like sometimes four little personalities running around the house.
That's incredible. And so, how old are they now?
So two-year olds.
With Gemini, so it's like four 2-year olds.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a
Oh my
full house.
gosh. Yeah. And so are they so different, similar? Like, what are their personalities like?
So their names are Jade and Nova, and they are different. Like Nova is baby A, which means the first baby to be born, and she's the smaller one, but she's tiny but mighty. She's the fierce one that is developmentally a little bit behind Jade, who's baby A and was a little bit bigger when she was born. But Jade is much more like shy, a little more timid. She takes her time. She's sensitive, and Nova is like a go-getter and ready to. She doesn't know how small she is. She's like that kind of tiny but mighty. She was 1 pound 14 ounces when she was born, and Jade was 2 pounds 5 ounces. So they are little warriors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I followed along your journey for a long time when I lived in Chicago. I moved there when I was 25. I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
I knew two people. I will not say I knew nobody, but I definitely moved there like with a suitcase and that's it, with a dream to own a PR firm and always watched you do incredible things. You were working with a reader at the time. You
Yeah.
also had a space with Elijah that was really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I met Elijah through Canvas and through a lot of my friends in art and Jackie Trezzo. And
Yeah.
I don't know, on social media, I just love like the way that you show the reality of your life, both as a advocate, as a mother, as somebody creating space for her community. And I love a lot of the different ways you do it. I just feel like it's so complex, but I also love that your career has grown with who you've become as a mother and a woman, like throwing incredible New Year's parties or these major events, but then also having like a queer parents party or queer families party and like really like evolving the way that you find joy based off the way your life has changed. And I think that's really a hard thing to do. Maybe comes easy because it's like what fits your life, but also as somebody who was working in nightlife and then found myself pregnant and I was like working with nightclubs with like a baby bump and I was like, how long can we pull this off for? Like I just really respect that. So talk a little bit about the evolution of how like your work has evolved based off of the life that you've chosen.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that question. And of course, you're asking that because you have a point of connection with it, which is just so nice to hear. So, shout out to all the party moms because it is a really strange
Yeah.
world and
Yeah.
exciting to be in live entertainment and nightlife as a pregnant person, as a parent of young kids, because quite frankly, like nightlife and live entertainment hospitality are really not environments where there's a lot of presence, specifically of moms and of small kids. Maybe there's the men out there that are running these establishments, but
Right.
nightlife is still really not an environment where you have a lot of people who are have families or are trying to make families or have small children at home. So that's been a really interesting paradox to be in these spaces. And it's always been really important for me to show up as myself and knowing that the person that I'm representing is potentially a mirror or a window for someone else. So
Right.
being pregnant in the club was really exciting to me. I mean, I loved it. I love the fashion. I had a few months where I was able to, you know, be bopping around venues with this bump, and that was very cool. But also, it's been very challenging, especially with how difficult my pregnancy was. I was very sick. I had twins, and so I was like really ill. And I have this story of the first party that I threw pregnant. It was in early 2022, and so we were just coming back to throwing parties again, and I was so excited, and we had this amazing turnout, like over 500 people to wait in the line, like around a block in 8-degree weather, because my party slow-mo, hadn't been throwing parties for a few years consistently because of the pandemic. And I was chatting with a friend who had just come out of a show, and they were still in their drag makeup. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. And I ran to the bathroom, and I'm throwing up in like the club's bathroom. And my friend Nico came over and was like, with heels 7 feet tall, just leaning over the bathroom stall, like, do you need some ginger ale? And it was a really iconic moment. I love that story because it's funny, but also it's so important that we see all kinds of people taking up all kinds of spaces. And so for
Yeah.
me, having pregnant people, people who are postpartum, people who are parents in nightlife and club spaces is so important. And how that has influenced that aspect of my work is just thinking about, well, what kind of experience would make it possible, and not just possible, but inviting and affirming to be
Yeah.
in a space like hospitality or entertainment. So, for example, we don't have bottle service for our seating or for our booths at our monthly party, Slow-Mo at Sleeping Village. We actually take reservations for those for people who are pregnant, postpartum, have mobility challenges, or really anything that might hinder them from being able to come to a club that just need to have a seat. And people have reached out to me who have just had surgeries, recovering from cancer, and a lot of pregnant people. So, I think
Wow.
when we design spaces that keep those types of unique physical experiences or eras in our lives in mind, all kinds of people can then access a space. So I think that that's been a really big part of, in the current era of my life, how I'm moving through it is, parents deserve to party too. And it's actually so important that we have autonomy from our home life and from our time with our kids, so we can come back energized and affirmed and feeling filled up to be our best selves with them. And I totally understand why that's so difficult for a lot of people to make space for, particularly with young children. I feel the same way myself. So I'm always trying to think about, well, how can I make this more conducive to the lifestyle? So, we have our party Old Gold. That's a daytime all vinyl party. It ends at 7 p.m. and you have to be over 30. So there's, I think, this spirit of, all right, we've been through a little bit of life together, and it's amazing to see who showed up in that space. Sometimes people are like, I got an hour. Or they might say, I haven't actually been out to a party, or I haven't seen you at one of your parties in like 10 years. So it's been
Oh,
very healing for me to be able to try to create environments that some of the people who've been with me and with some of my events and parties for these last 10, 15 plus years, who are also making shifts and changes in their lives, that there's room on the bus for them to come along with us, because nightlife is always going to be a youth sport, right? And so there's always going to be space for young people. Um, but thinking about all different types of experiences, because everybody has the right to enjoy themselves. Everybody has a right to party, we just do it differently. Yeah.
I literally wrote down when you were talking, parents deserve to party, because that will definitely be the name of this podcast episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
remember being at like Canvas, the artist collective.
Yeah.
They did the Subchroma events that I did the PR for, and then they did the New Year's Eve parties that I got on like ABC. There's like the 4 parties on Chicago ABC, and
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
one. Was like so proud that I could get this artist collective that was in Wicker Park to be like the one, then there's like one at some big ballroom at some major named hotel. And I'm like, here we go. But
It's
I
so
remember they had,
important.
it's so important. But I remember that I had my son Henry as a single mom in Chicago.
Wow.
Uh, and he was born on January 15th. And so, December 31st, I'm 9.5 months pregnant.
Wow.
And it's a New Year's Eve party, and it's very like underground. I mean, it felt like a rave.
Yeah.
And here
Yeah.
I
Campus
am.
parties. I remember. I did one of those New Year's parties. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember there was so many of them. And like getting like nods from like, a guy or a girl, like, what's up? And then like the look down, it's like from the SNL skit where like Amy Poehler is like at a bar, like making eyes, and then she like sits up and she's got the big belly, and the guys are like, ah, it's
Yeah.
like a fabulous. But it also was interesting the way that my clients, straight men, uh acted. It was like a very, you're the cool chick. You're like the kind of like, you get us, and I've always kind of been that. So there was also like a really interesting identity in being like a very masculine woman who handled business like a boss and found her way to kind of in a sense, in a way of like in drag, like mimicking what I'm seeing with the guys and the Chicago guys and the money and the kind of mobby mentality. I kind of like emulated that as a Pisces and like put that on. And
Mm,
they were like, yes, you're our girl. So then I felt like I found my family. I feel like I
mm,
found my identity. I feel welcome. I'm able to be in my masculine in business. And nobody's like, why are you being so intense? Like, I really felt like I had found my own and started this PR firm. And then all of a sudden after dating somebody for not very long, discovered that I
mm,
was pregnant,
mm,
and we were not going to do that together. And I felt very connected to my son's soul. Like I frankly was 30 years old. I had never been pregnant in my entire life. And I
mm.
just felt like I'm doing great. And this, I don't know, this is happening. But it was really interesting to see the way that the business slowly but surely fell off, where men were sort of distrusting of me, that I couldn't handle it. And it's interesting because even to this day, when I'm like on my period or in my hormones being pregnant, also again with my daughter later on, I felt the most clear I've ever felt in my life. I was just being brutally honest. Like I've
Yeah.
never felt more clear than when I'm angry on my period. I know exactly what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I'm just having the balls to say it.
Right.
And so I also find like the evolution of motherhood and the way it works in business really interesting, because you've been fortunate that your community has supported you in the evolution. And I'm not saying it's been an easy road, but like how beautiful that you have those people that partied with you in those like 20s club days and then found you again. And I just find that so interesting because it was like, I felt like so different for me, where it was like, okay, now like you aren't part of this anymore. Or I felt kind of
Mm.
like maybe you can't handle it now. And so it's a beautiful thing that you stayed in the same city. I ended up coming back to San Diego and kind of building from scratch and have a really amazing life here now and fantastic clients. But it was really hard to like understand why this feminine thing that's happening to me wasn't allowing for me to still be in those sort of masculine roles or spaces with men, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like we come up over and over again. How much do I want to put this at the forefront? And sometimes it's just easier to not. And then
Yeah.
sometimes it feels almost like this, right? And like a protest, or if anything, just a reminder to have that out there. I wrote an email today to Helen Pirate Selshed, and I was like, this week has been particularly wild for the parent professional juggle. Like I thought about that even in that moment of, do I care? Do I want to say that? Because you also wonder, oh, are they going to think I can't handle this because
Yes.
I'm distracted by my parenthood? And then I come to that a lot. And it's interesting because I don't actually personally feel I need to say that. When I'm using it, sometimes I think just because I think it needs to be injected into these spaces and into the consciousness. And
Agreed.
even with my community, and I think with the type of orientation around awareness, acceptance, expansiveness in identity and roles that I think a lot of people who are LGBTQ or allies rest their principles on. It doesn't mean that our um, our subconscious doesn't come through, or that we don't get used to a certain way of
Right.
experiencing someone, right? So even for me, it's actually been quite challenging to continue to work with some of the people that I did before, because I still show up with this same kind of capabilities, focus, organization that I always have, because it's such a regimented practice for me.
Mhm.
And sometimes I feel like people are so comfortable with the way that I have shown up that they haven't had to necessarily reorient or think about how they should move differently in this new time in my life. And
Yeah.
I'm faced with that choice of, am I going to try and like do the really difficult work to shift this relationship and this dynamic? Or is it easier for me to just move forward knowing that I'm doing my best and to
Mhm.
save that energy? Because I think if there's anything that I have learned since becoming a
Mm.
parent, it is like your time is not infinite. And so you have to be so deliberate with your choices. And that, I think, is one of the greatest challenges, but it's also an amazing invitation, because the way that I used to go, in my mind, it was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it done. And that wasn't even really conscious. It was just such a mode of operation. And I'm sure you can relate to it when you run your own business and you're literally responsible for everything and the stakes are really high. And unfortunately, I pushed my body really far with that and did things that perhaps I should have had a different barometer
Yeah.
of stress. And then,
Right.
when I was under immense stress with my twin pregnancy and was in the hospital for pneumonia, it was my last event. It was my very last event. I was going to take my whole third trimester off since I had a high risk pregnancy. And my final event for Slomo was this suited and booted pride ball. And I'm like running this headquarters from my labor and delivery room where they have me, um, being monitored. And I don't blame myself for this, but it's something that I have to do a lot of work on
Mm.
separating the responsibility that I have in how sick I got when I went into heart failure and they had to deliver my twins, because, my health was declining so quickly. And I woke up in the ICU, no longer pregnant. My children were in the NICU, and a few, you know, hours or maybe the next day after being extubated and taken off life support, I paid a bunch of people. I like went down a list and my wife helped me just send out some Venmos and Zells, which seems nuts, but I was like, I'm going to have to deal with this later. I also have a lot of artists who are very much gig to gig or paycheck to paycheck. It's going to take us a half hour and then I can put it aside. So I think that's the most extreme of stories and examples, but
Yeah.
I give
It's
that as
such.
an example of like, all right, what is going to create more space and time for me? And in that moment, I was just like, this will get this taken care of. And it's just not going to be detrimental to people's livelihoods without this check. So,
Right.
but also, I think I look back on that particular time in my life and I'm like, if anyone had earned a little bit of bandwidth and leeway from her community and colleagues, it was probably me. But it was such a mode
Yeah.
of operation to be like, just handle business and then you can go back to regaining your life. I
I
know.
didn't realize it was in that order because I
Yeah.
have you're constantly on my Instagram. Like you're on like the top like 7. Like I see your stuff all the time, and I knew that you had pneumonia. I didn't realize that the pneumonia then like pushed the birth early. Like I didn't know those two were
Yeah.
connected, and I didn't know that the pneumonia got so bad like during your last event. So though that order of events and the trauma is so 10 out of 10 like beyond.
Yeah.
I still see you posting about it like this time last year, this time 2 years ago, and reflecting. What in your reflection like 2 years later, do you feel like how did working that much and getting your body in a place that was so challenging, difficult, and life threatening, how do you operate differently now? Like, how do you unlearn those things?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
I
Great
can tell you in
question.
a moment after you answer this question, but I am literally in this moment right now
Yeah.
where I've committed to too much. I cannot let people down.
Yeah.
Things are already on the move on every single front. There is no pulling back. And I have this moment right now that I don't get very often. In the 10 years I've owned Chrome City, it's happened to me two other times, and I'm in
Mm,
it right now, which is sort of, I've gone too far,
mm,
committed to too much, and I don't have a choice. And so I've been crying a lot because
yeah.
there is no, like, I'm just like, we're here, I've got people to pay. So what was the unlearning of that? Because I feel you on everything. My life wasn't threatened, nor did those happen to my children in that way. But that feeling of creating community and then being sort of honored as, the party mom, or, I'm very much looked at as like somebody whose work ethic is so strong that I can get anything done for the community, when there's a lot of people who want to and appreciate it, but just don't do it the way I do it. So
Yeah.
you're like so good at what you do that you're held to like, then I need to do this.
Yeah.
And I also have a life to pay for. And so it has to be done. But there's a point where like I'm trying to start to figure out like, how do I do this differently, And
Yeah.
so that was my question to you.
It's so difficult. And I think even just that naming of that standard and that standard you hold for yourself, and knowing how many people grow to rely on that, it's those shifts. I think it's changing those expectations and dynamics within relationships. And it does, it's hard because it does put some of the work back on us to re-establish, or shouldn't even say re-establish, but say, hey, this is where I'm at right now. And that can be really uncomfortable and difficult to do if you've been, moving a certain way for such a long period of time. And it's definitely something that I'm in the middle of myself. And to be perfectly
Mhm.
honest, I'm moving into new projects. I mean, that's really what I've come to, is that I feel like the same person that I was, but obviously I've shifted so much in these last couple of years, and I'm
Yeah.
craving different types of relationships, of ways of engaging with work, of who I want to engage, and um, that kind of growth can be difficult to do if the work that you're currently doing and the people you're doing it with is staying the same, and you feel you're headed somewhere else. So
Mhm.
I think first it's having that realistic approach to, okay, who could who do I think actually could hold space for where I am, and starting with those people first, so that you have some backup, and so that you can feel a
Yeah.
little bit more confident in that reinforcement, and knowing that understanding, and then maybe the type of affirmation and support you might get in return, is not going to come from anyone. So who are those like close people? And sometimes you need to really pay attention, because people might show up that you didn't expect. So making
Right.
sure you're not missing those people, because you're so focused on the people that don't get it. Um,
Yeah.
for me, I think, in terms of answering your question about like that shift and how I've been able to do that, quite frankly, with my kids, it sort of demanded it, because it's like, I what am I going to do? I've got these kids, and they might be sick, or they need something from me. Am I going to be so distracted by my work that I can't show up for them in a moment where they really need it? So I think for me personally, the prompt of two small children was like, I don't want to miss these really exciting moments because I'm so distracted, even if it's just that I'm mentally distracted. And I
Right.
know how short that time is with them. And so I'm feeling more protective of that. Um,
Yeah.
I really prioritize rest. And because of that, I've had some things got to go. So I don't do nearly as much social stuff as I used to. Probably a lot more than like a lot, maybe more than a lot of people's standards, but it's certainly a different pace for me. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it is work, but that constant evaluation of, what am I doing for myself, for my spirit, for my relationship? I mean, my wife and I have both been through so much, and I think we're now 2 years postpartum for both of us.
Hmm.
On the other side of a lot of PTSD we both had to work through. I mean, she witnessed something that I wasn't conscious for, and I think that was a whole different experience, and what she had to hold through that, and also while I was in recovery for quite a while, and then us, and how we spent our first 3 months as parents going to a NICU. So, I think having grace for ourselves is like so important. But if you're so hardwired, like it sounds like you are similar to me in that way of giving that permission, it almost feels like it's not
Yeah.
possible, but it is. And I think it's also that like radical acceptance of some things aren't going to be maybe to the standard that you wanted, but
Yeah.
what can you do to just get it where it needs to be? And what are the most important things, or maybe one most important thing that really needs to give your energy? And so it's almost like three levels. Like, what do we need to do just to get it to where it needs to be so that everything's okay? And maybe we can revisit it when there's more capacity. What is maybe one or two things that is like, this is the priority, and then just some shit you gotta let go of. And that's sort
Yeah.
of my new MO is like, all right, what can we chop and just feel actually a little bit lighter? Because when you let go of something, you're making room for something else, even if, and probably most importantly, when that might be even just more time for yourself.
Right. 100%. I know it's really, really hard because I feel as though at this type of success as a result of that relentless nature that you were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. I'll do anything to get it done. My body, my stress, my sleep, it doesn't matter, right? And in the 20s, in some ways, I know people like hate hustle culture. I kind of think it's good because that's how you learn balance. It's kind of where you can like
Bound in your boundaries. Yeah.
yeah, like stratosphere your way up and then get to a place where you get to make choices. That
Yeah.
was always my MO. Like in my 20s, I'm going to do, whatever it takes, work as long and hard as possible so that I can enjoy this time. And what I found is that like I've attracted people who think so highly of me and their expectations are so high because my work is so great
Hmm.
that now I've gotten myself into a little pickle where
Yeah.
where I'm like, the demands and expectations are wildly high because that's what I do and that's how I pitched myself. And
Yeah.
so I've really been also like evaluating my ego
Yeah.
because how many of these choices are around saying that this is my client because he's the biggest, baddest, most, badass motherfucker in town. And he picked me of all the other agencies that he could have picked. He picked me. And so there's two parts to that. One is how far am I willing to go to accomplish the work that we're working on and lose myself in it and then not be that great person he chose. And on the other hand, it's that same conversation you said, like, how do I tell, frankly, two of my biggest, best clients who I love as humans who don't have kids, how far do I go? And when you were talking about that email, I thought the first thing I thought was, well, maybe they can relate. But it is something where, like, immediately when you kind of walked me through, like, where your thought was on that, I was like, oh, yeah, I would never tell anybody like that. I even, I think I take Lennon, my daughter, to ballet on Friday mornings, and it's a glorious time because I produce most of my events on Thursdays. So it's just nice for my other non-event clients to be like, ballet, but really I'm like crawling into ballet. Like I was up until 1 in the morning
Yeah.
cleaning up candles and flowers.
Yeah.
Like last night. I mean, I'm like puffy because we were just thousands of candles and flowers were being, put away. And so it's really hard because the woman, and I really do feel like a kindred spirit with you, but it's almost like the women that we were in our 20s working our asses off to sort of get this recognition. And it wasn't for the recognition, but it feels damn good. I mean, let's admit it,
Mm-hmm.
that you are the one to go to for X, Y, and Z because we love our community, but because we also, want to be that for people. And then now to go, oof, I don't know if I can do that for you. The unwinding of that is like, I mean, I'm 38 and I'm like, I don't know. I know how to say no, but I don't know how to unwind. Like, I'm like, how do I go from big baddie speaker to just like, I don't know, making quiet money with like a random client that like I don't need to be in the public sphere and I get to like pick my kids up every day. Like, I'm in that same place where I'm like, is that where we're going? It's like not having the same joy of doing what I'm doing,
Mm.
of more public stuff where it's like my dream was just to be really public and community. And I don't know, I've just felt a little tug on my heart. Like, is that still where we need to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like that type of evolution takes time. And when we don't
Yeah.
have the answer yet, then we just don't. Something I've been thinking about a lot and keep saying is things take the time they take. And
Yeah.
I think if you are the type of person who can make a lot of things happen when things are not within your control, you're still trying to find a way to do it. And
Yeah.
so embracing that things take the time they take, including like our lessons or our personal growth of, where we are, like that, sitting in that I think is really important. And it's just very uncomfortable if you're someone that is very goals oriented or action and outcome oriented. And I
Yeah.
think some of the best growth is really happening when we don't have the answers and we don't yet have it figured out. Because when something does click, you're like, oh, okay.
That
All
was
of
it.
that sort of gestating, if you will.
Yep.
Now this is on the other side, and we don't know how long it takes always when we plant a seed to see how it's going to grow. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And yeah, things just take the time that they take,
Right.
and we
And
might
being
let
okay
people
with
down.
that.
Like sometimes you let people down. Sometimes the people
Yeah.
have an idea of who you are, and you're like, well, I'm just not, or I'm not able to show up in the same ways. And there's going to be the people that are excited by that, and they're going to go along with that for you. There's going to be people that need a little bit more help, and there's some relationships that end, and sometimes relationships or things or projects, eras,
Yeah.
they need to end. And I think we're
Yeah.
afraid of that, especially if we don't want to let go. And then I think also the ego of like, what does that say about me? But I think it's very powerful to learn how to not just say no, but to be able to let go too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely sitting in that space of acknowledging the shift within, feeling like you're needing something different. You continue to do the work you're doing because that is your job and you have a family and you have that responsibility. And then there's parts where you're like both sort of like, oh, what am I doing? But also I'm dreaming like of what's possible. And so it's this very odd space to be where I think for so long, I've really just felt like I was in my place, in my groove, right time, right place. My mom always says you have pixie dust. I always, as silly as it sounds, like I always get a good parking spot. I always end up backstage at a show. Like I just have an energy that is like accepting of great things. And so, yeah, this time has been hard because I have everything I've ever wanted, and more. And I don't want to say I feel dissatisfied because that is certainly not the word. I think I just feel this sort of recent rush of like, is this working for you?
Yeah.
And it was an unexpected rush where I was like, wait, I've been kind of like crushing it and momming and eventing and this and fianceing and friending and I don't know what's been going on in my soul. And just like the last week of just like, I don't know about this for you. I don't know if this is working for you. And I'm like, where'd this come from? Who's this girl? Like, where did it stop?
Well, those voices are so important because it's going to come up somehow, and it might
Yeah.
be when you least expect it. I don't know
Yeah.
how much you're into astrology, but I know that like very recently, I know this because my wife is a Libra and her birthday's October 2nd. It was the same day of the eclipse and the new moon. And everything I read was major, major shifts and breaking points and new pathways and,
Yes.
certain patterns, behaviors, projects, relationships ending and leaning into new ones. And I'm trying to embrace that. Everyone I'm talking to is having a similar experience.
I know. Me
It's hard to let
too.
things go. It's hard to, I mean, it's hard to do, but I think of like listening to that voice and making a little bit of space for it is important because it's coming from somewhere.
I read this thing from Moon Omens on Instagram. I don't know if you follow them. It's incredible. But I'm just going to read it because it's so pertinent to what you're saying right now. It says, feels strange, doesn't it? This awkward in between phase you've been passing through on the way to your next chapter. I'm going to start crying. It's a confusing period of your life where the only thing you're sure of is that your soul is expanding to newer heights. You've been through periods like this in the past, but something about this one just feels different. This one has your heart beating in urgency while your mind basks in calmness. This one has you reflecting while saying a lot less. This one has you exercising your patience vigorously while the universe bombards you with signs relating to your dreams. It's like your spirit is being split in two as your new and old self fight over it.
Mm.
Fear keeps threatening to take control, but you're so much stronger than you used to be. That's why you're not going to let it. Ground yourself in the present repeatedly, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Resistance will have you permanently stuck in a chapter that was meant to be temporary. Acceptance will allow you to naturally flow right through it. You've reached a very pivotal moment in your journey. You can either suppress your magic or revitalize it. Ah, yeah. The
Yeah.
last sentence is welcome to the wonderful world of ascension.
Wow. Yeah. I think you can't ascend, right? If you're way down. So you
Yeah.
have to let some things go. I think that's like a really important thing to remember is we can't take all of it with us. And
I'm
especially when
with you.
we're mothering and all the things that you described, the sort of pie chart of life, if you will, those your where we give our time and our energy to is supposed to shift and change. But if we're in a certain type of like mode of operation, that can be difficult. And I I know you're the same where you're an entrepreneur and when you're making all the decisions on your own and you're also a mother, there can be like a real isolation and
Mm,
loneliness in that. Like, and that's why I don't always, I shouldn't say always, but I find myself in moments where I'm wondering how much I want to put my internal world, like being a parent or a mother, in in my working world, because um sometimes it's almost like, is it even, do I even want to do that? Do I want to just be focused and show up in this way in my job? But I also feel like we've, as a broader culture, have to make more room for the nuances and the needs of parenting, not because it's more important than anyone who doesn't have kids, for
right.
absolute sure. But I know for me in nightlife and live entertainment, for example, these are spaces that are predominantly usually owned or operated by, managed by men. And I think a maternal lens to me is not necessarily just about, oh, you've carried and or raising children. It's about care and working through a lens of care and designing spaces, work environments, ecosystem projects, whatever it is, through a lens of care and a constant readdressing of like needs, right? And that can be even very micro, like even on a call. That's asking and checking in and seeing where everyone is at. These are the things that just have a consciousness that acknowledges that people are bringing their days, their lives into a room, whether that room is the Zoom room or whether that room is the dance floor, like at our parties. And so I think for me, I've always operated through this maternal lens, which is where my moniker party mom came from. And then I really deepened that as a parent because I became even more aware of what it's like to have an underrepresented experience and things that just aren't thought of. Something as simple as being able to have a seat. And again, this is sort of like goes back to the broader value and urgency around accessibility and equity in all things, because the more we can make spaces that are considerate of a variety of lived experiences, more people can show up and be in those spaces. So I feel like for me, with being a event producer and party promoter, it's just helped me think about other people's experiences, which is a kind of mode of operation I've always been in, but making sure that I'm not thinking I have it all figured out. I think it's so important to constantly remain open and know that you have more to learn about other people, particularly if you're in the work and in the business of people. You're
Yeah.
never always going to know. You come with your biases, you come with your privileges, and everyone has them. And so, how are you making sure that you're still leaving enough room to even see and allow space for some of those, like, new ideas, if that makes sense? So And that can all be really challenging too when you're like juggling a lot. So I think it's also like, okay, you can't do it all. Um, and that's why we have to say, I don't even say just say no, but let go of things so that we can make sure that we have space for, what is really important at our very current moment in our lives.
Yeah. I also think that's why like intimate events is something that I love so much because quite frankly, I mean, you seem to have such an incredible community and who knows what's on Instagram is the same, but I realized very recently talking to my friend Michael Corrigan. I don't know if you know him. He lives in Chicago, one of my dearest friends. We could have like maybe 3 15-minute catch ups every year and we
Yeah.
love each other from afar, but we're just busy. And we were talking and I was just kind of expressing that I was struggling and that's also hard for me because I'm always the friend that's like figured it all out and is there for everyone through their shit and I've lost friends before when I've been like I'm really not okay and I've definitely had them be like I don't really know you like this. I don't know what to do with this. Maybe
Mm,
those words weren't said but the actions reflected that. So I'm
mm,
always also a little scared to tell people when I'm not okay even though everyone's like, lean on your friend, whatever, say that. And whenever people post that thing, check on your strong friends, I'm always
yeah.
like, that is so real for me.
Yeah.
Please, nobody ever checks on me because they think I have it all figured out. But nonetheless, I said to him, I said, I realized that the way that I build community, I'm around such incredible women so often that I think I've checked the box of women friendships. And I realized that I haven't dove in deep or like, I was like, these women that I see at the events over and over, we have deep, meaningful conversations. We share our lives, our career. I said, I don't even know where they live. I've
Mm,
never even been to their home. I haven't like, even had like maybe a coffee with them.
mm,
And so I think, intimate friendship moments to share and it's hard to find. That's why this podcast is so important to me because I'm finding women who are running businesses, creating community and sometimes have children, which is this whole other experience that if you do all three, which you do, it just feels like this like unicorn for me because
mm,
I'm like, oh my gosh, I could probably sit and talk to you for hours. Because it's a complex life. It's complex being a woman. It's complex being in the LGBT community. It's complex to be a mother. It's complex to be married. It's complex to own a business that's evolving and changing to the needs of yourself and your community.
yeah.
And so with that, I'm just so grateful that we've been able to have this conversation because um, it's a necessary one and one that's ever evolving. And I hope that more people hear this and can relate it to some of the many pieces of the complexities of both who you and I are.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of what we talked about was like the representatives, like of what and who people see. And, some of that we have control over and some we don't because people are going to take in and perceive the way that they're going to, right? But what I go back to is moving with integrity. Like, am I moving with integrity, but not just to other people, but to myself? And that's I think like where I'm at in my reflection is like wait and in my body. And so I've been so mental for so long. I've been operated so strongly from my mind and in a way that has not necessarily connected back to my body. And so I have been in this journey. Calling it Be in My Body year because I've been in such high stress situations and been able to move through them and move through a crisis in such a clear and impressive way because I've had so much experience with it, which is a great skill. But what I realized is that I had maybe at times fully disconnected to what was going on for me. And then
Yeah.
I had the ultimate, trauma of happen, during my pregnancy and then my, surprise and emergency birth. And so it was really this invitation that to look at and say like, all right, that you are strong here and you're operating from a very strong mind even in this time of distress. Well, what's going on for your body and what does your body need? And so sometimes it's as simple as rest. Like I took a nap before this interview and there was some other work I needed to do, but I knew that that wasn't going to get done and this wasn't going to be a great conversation. I lay down for 30 minutes. I think those thinking when you're not sure, like some of the things you described, when you're like, I'm in this uncomfortable push pull period, going back and thinking about how your body's experiencing this time and what's feeling really good to you and what's feeling really nourishing. Because a lot of times I think our nervous systems are just kind of, they're chugging along, but we don't know that they might be afraid and we need something that's going to be
Yeah.
stabilizing. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot, and the many ways I can do that. Like a few weeks ago, it was a beautiful day and I had an afternoon and I went kayaking. Like I just got in the car and I went and did it. And I don't always have that kind of time, but I thought, why not? Why not now?
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And in that moment, it was great for me because it was so great physically and I enjoyed it and I was out in the sun, but it was very mentally stimulating. So I say, like, when in doubt.
It
What's that?
also means that moment, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
that like
no.
you've been doing the work enough to even have the space to have that thought. You
Yeah.
know, like that's like a reflection of your work that like your body and mind were connected enough to be like, let's go do this today. Because
Yeah.
I think I'm just about to start therapy again for who knows, maybe, I've always gone off and on, but
Yeah.
I'm like feeling this. I'm like, it's time.
Yeah.
And when you brought this up, I thought, you know what, my focus will, because I like to go in with a certain intention. I don't like to go and be like, here's all the shit.
Right.
Um, Connecting my body and mind will be the intention because I am wildly overachiever disconnected.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yes.
I mean, even my fiance, bless his heart, like he's has a lot of emotions, but he feels them. And I kind of like to just keep it nice and chill and light and lean and, and he's sometimes like, you're not even here. Like you're
Yeah.
still in the office. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know how
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, it stays, and it can live in different parts of us. And we don't know. And that's something that I found just by moving my body in different ways. That's what I'm also trying to do, is a variety of ways and trying new things maybe I wouldn't do before, just to see how I respond and to help strengthen, like you said, that mind body connection. Because I think if you're someone who, and it sounds like you are, that might be able to, or is constantly in mode of rationalizing, making decisions, feeling very strong in your mind with how you work through things, that doesn't mean that there is that you've completely resolved that, in a more holistic 360 way. And so sometimes I think it's really important to be like, all right, I don't exactly have this figured out. How can I go inward a little bit more? And I've surprised myself and realized that I've found answers that I didn't know
once
I
you
would find so many times. Yeah. And for people
slowing,
where just the strong mind has, like, we got to quiet it down sometimes, it does not always need to lead. And if you have such a strong mind in that way, it's like, that's great. You're doing an awesome job. It's just like any muscle. Where are there other parts in your body and your spirit that need to
yeah,
be given attention and maybe strengthened a little bit more?
yeah, amen to that. Well, this is our time. Thank you
All
so very,
right.
very, very much for
Yeah.
yours. Let everybody know where they can find you, follow you, support you.
Thank you so much for having me on an awesome conversation. Great to connect with you. You can find me. I am on Instagram. My handle is Party Mom Shy, CHI for Chicago. And my party Slow-Mo, which we've referred to a few times, is SLOMO, Slow-Mo Party. And it is the longest running LGBT dance party in Chicago. And I'm out and about in Chicago. So if you're tuning in from Chicago, say hi. You see me out in the streets or on the dance floor.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. I appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful weekend and we'll talk to you soon.